Yes. I can help you. Okay, perfect. We have another question. No. Right?
Kimberly Anderson. Yay! Thank you for laughing. Bridget Edwards.
Here you go, Bill. Here's your leash.
I'm not doing it anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Which one of you want to wear this?
What was that?
Which one of you want to wear this?
Elaine does.
If you don't mind. It's for promotional purposes.
Are you recording it?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
But that means you're going to be up there too, so you'll get recorded too.
Yeah, that's fine. I thought it was a microphone. Like, is it on right now?
Please turn it off.
I don't know why you couldn't hear anything. He's recording us on video.
Elby, where are you? There you go.
There were no door prizes last year.
You know, this is new. It's kind of showbiz stuff.
Did you put our names in there?
No, but something. No, you meant it. I could tell.
Tiffany. Now we're talking again. Two more this time. There. Alba. One more for this time around. Elizabeth, Becky, here's yours. Where's Elizabeth? All right. I'm done. Now you're with us.
Okay, we have, I usually try to get former student teachers to come back and talk to the to-be student teachers. And today we got Brianna Embry and Elaine Barnes. They student taught
January. Yep, January semester.
this last spring, so they're pretty fresh off the experience. And I'll let them tell you where they student taught and so on. Ladies?
Is it on? Okay. Okay, my name is Elaine Barnes, and I did my student teaching in Sioux City. I taught second grade was my first placement, and my second placement was fourth grade, and both in gen ed classes.
And Brianna Embry. I student taught in the spring also, and my first placement was in Crawfordsville at a fourth grade gen ed room. My second placement was special ed in Columbus Junction, and that was grades 2nd through 6th.
What do you want to know?
You want to just start with kind of your general thoughts about student teaching?
Yeah, we were actually just talking when we first got here today that we both had really great experiences in one of ours and a little more challenging experiences in the second one. But that the challenging, that both, like I learned a lot from both, and I'm glad that I had both. Because you kind of learn what you do want to do and what you don't want to do, and things that the ways that you want to interact with students, the good things the teachers taught you, and from the things that you didn't think were so good, then you just know that's what you don't want to do. But definitely learn from both, and that's the real world. You know, you're going to work with people who you get along with really well, and you'll work with people that you don't, but you still have to figure out how to make it work. And very challenging students in my second placement, but like I said, I would rather have that off the bat than expect things to be great and perfect and then find out that it's not. So it was good.
Yeah, you can learn just as much from the non-examples as you can the good examples. But so my first placement in 4th grade, the teacher there was totally willing to let me just do whatever I wanted. So I was able to take risks in a way and just say, hey, I have this idea, can I do it? Told her my plan and she let me go with it. Like, I created my whole social studies unit. It wasn't even anything that she had. She just gave me the freedom to do that, and so I did it, and it turned out really well. My second placement, it was awesome. The teacher, she was very sweet, very caring. I could tell she was very dedicated to her job, but she was a little more overwhelming, and she even spent the night at the school sometimes. Like, her work hours were crazy, but for the most part, you need to follow your co-op schedule to get the full experience, but at the same time, you don't have to stay there at 10 o'clock every night.
You don't sleep at the school.
Yeah, but I mean, she was very sweet. She was much more on top of me and much more detail oriented, but it was a great experience either way for both of them. So, you guys have questions? Yeah.
So did you ladies like experiment with your organizations between like all the things you had to get done? Did you find a good way to space out your time and make sure like you can use a planner or reminders in your phone?
Like to see.
Feeling a little overwhelmed with this and you know what I mean?
Okay, so like the first, I was so stressed going into the first one because I had no idea what to experience, right? Or to expect. So you get like a week-ish to really just observe the first teacher, and then that's when you can take notes and ask your questions and then let them see you do a few things. And what I did for my first placement, I just copied down her schedule, and that way I knew I had this amount of time for this lesson and this, and I literally kept like a checklist each day until I got more comfortable with it, and I'd check things off as I went or add things in when surprise assemblies would come up or early out. Like, we had 2 weeks off because we had a polar vortex winter, so that was like the most stressful thing, but I just kept a checklist.
Yeah, and student teaching is like it is like when you start your college classes and you look at your syllabus and see all the stuff you're going to have to do, it's incredibly overwhelming. And so we were just talking that when we were sitting here last year, that's exactly how I felt, like looking at everything you have to do, plus know that you have to student teach, take over the classes, do all these things, and you're like, how on earth? But once you get into it, like you said, there's a very gradual pace to it, and I use Planbook online for my lesson planning, but I asked, my biggest thing I would suggest to you is to ask as many questions of your teacher when you get there as you can. And I even apologized to my teacher. I was like, I'm sorry for all the questions. And she was like, no, I want you to ask. And because if you don't, you just stress about it and you don't know what to do. And they don't expect you to know everything either. But the more questions you ask at the beginning of why they do something or how that works or what they've tried before, or if they think this would be different. I mean, they're very willing to talk. They wouldn't take you as a student teacher if they didn't want to help you. So ask tons of questions up front. My teacher gave me her cell phone number, so I would text her all the time too with a lot of questions. But anyway, back to the schedule. So you really do gradually get into it. And then I tried to do a lot of my observations and like the extra assignments that you have. I did them towards the end of my first placement. After I was done teaching and you start to get some of that responsibility back over, you're like, wow, I'm really used to doing everything all the time, and so now I have this extra time, and that's a great place to plug in the extra stuff. Like, go observe another teacher in that building. Go find the counselor to talk and do the interview with them. Go do your principal mock interview at that time. And then when you got into the second placement, I had so much of that done out of the way that I just really started focusing more on looking for jobs, and doing that kind of stuff. But there's plenty of time. You feel like there's not, but you really do have plenty of time. I wouldn't say to procrastinate any of it. Get done what you can get done, but there is time in your 16 weeks to finish all of that. So,
and everyone's going to make sure that you get it done.
Yeah.
Like, even like I mentioned those 2 weeks off, like that's when I was like, well, I'm not going to get anything done. But they make it happen. Everybody's here to see you succeed, and when you get that constructive criticism too, it's not like, wow, you're a failure. Like, everybody wants you to succeed and get the most out of this, so. Any other questions?
Did they find a job?
Yeah. I actually took my co-op job because she transferred out somewhere else. And so that's another thing. Take your mock interviews and mock evaluations very seriously and make them as formal and realistic as you can, because my mock interview was with the principal that's now my boss. So you have to take it seriously. But yeah, so I'm teaching 4th grade at WPU. Thank you.
I have a 1st grade position next year, so, yep. It's good to be on the other end. Yep.
How have you been preparing for your new teaching position?
I'm sorry, what?
How have you been preparing for your new
I worked in a school before. When I was taking classes, I was a library assistant. And so I have a lot of people that I worked with for like the past 8 years. And so when I found out I was getting a 1st grade job, I called my 1st grade teacher friends that I've worked with and I said, we need to talk. And so we went out for coffee and I said, how does school even start? Because student teaching, you jump in at the end of the year and you know how things go because they've been going that way for a long time. And I've gone back to all of them are like, you need to get the first day of school book, which we've used in our classes. And so, I talked a lot to them about preparing for class and things that they do. I have asked them, what's your favorite thing about 1st grade? What's the hardest thing about 1st grade? And just using the people that you've met. My 2nd grade teacher that I worked with for student teaching, I contacted her after my principal called her and said, would you hire her? And I said, can we talk? And so we've chatted back and forth. And so I think the best thing is to find people who've been where you are and just get ideas from them and use your principals. They're huge assets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And that's also, I don't know, I'm sure they've talked about it, like when you go to student teach, you're not just there to get to know your co-op or the principal, like you think you don't have time, but you have plenty of time to go around and meet everybody in the building. Then if you get a job there, you already know those people and you have all those resources for that district, as well as people that have already taught that grade before. And I was a para for 7 years too, so I have teacher friends that I've been talking with and bouncing ideas off of.
The other 1st grade teacher, there were 2 1st grade jobs opened at the school that I'm going to be working at, and the other teacher worked, she did a lot of her practicum hours in that school too. And so that was, it's all about connections. And so you may end up at the schools that you do your practicum or that you student teach, and so make good relationships with everybody there because they loved her. And so as soon as it came up for a job and she applied, they were like, yep, we're hiring her. So that was good for her.
May I ask what prepared you the best for student teaching?
That's a good question.
I don't know if I felt prepared for
Yeah.
student teaching. Our classes, obviously, but you fall back. I think the thing with me is I had to keep reminding myself, I know you know this, you're prepared for this. You've been taking classes for 3 years, you've had instructors that have helped you. You just need to have the confidence to know that you can do this. And if you walk into the classroom and you're excited to meet the kids, excited to meet the teachers, and you're ready to learn, like, you're going to be fine. You're not going to fit. I remember Bill Cox was telling our class one time that they have not failed maybe one person that didn't get to go on student teaching because they couldn't stand up in front of a class of like 5 kids and talk. Like, everybody gets through this. And the thing I kept telling myself is I don't know if I'm going to tell you how old I almost am. I'm almost 40, and I'm like, there are kids straight out of college who are 20-some years old, and some of you are probably that way, who do this and get jobs, and so it's you're going to be fine. But I think just falling back on knowing that you've been trained and you've taken classes and you've done all the hard work, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, this is just you getting to show what you know now. Like you've trained, and now this is just you proving that you can do it. And I think it's also important, I don't know if it's a requirement, but to meet with your co-ops before student teaching. Like, don't just go there the day that you start and be like, hey. Like, I went and met with both of mine a few months before, and we talked. They showed me around the classroom. We talked about what to expect. Like, that gives you a better idea too. And just go into it with a level head and realize like this is important, this is going to be 4 months, I've got to be dedicated to it, and get out of your comfort zone. Like I know that's like really hard for me to get out of my comfort zone, but I did that, especially with 4th grade. I was used to 1st and 2nd graders, and then I went to 4th grade and I was like, oh my gosh, Common Core math, I don't know any of this, and these old kids, like they're going to be rude, and it was odd, and I ended up loving that. I'm like, oh, I kind of prefer that, but getting out of your comfort zone and then just using the people around you and meeting with your co-ops and communicating, you'll be fine.
And as soon as you have those kids who come up to you after your 4th day of being there and are hugging you and, oh, we're so glad, and you're my favorite teacher, and can you be my teacher now? And I mean, you get into that really easily, because that's what you're there for, is the kids. And I know it's easy to worry about what your teacher thinks and your supervising teacher and the other teachers, but you know, you're there for the kids. And if you pour yourself into that position and, you know, they give you the confidence you need to keep going and doing what you obviously love to do, or hopefully you wouldn't be here if you didn't want to do it. So, and I met with both of my teachers. I just sent them an email beforehand and said, can we meet? And they introduced me to the kids, and that helps to know what you were walking into.
Mm-hmm.
This could be short.
Can you share about a difficult situation and how you ended up handling that situation?
Okay, I have one. So my first placement, like I said, was in 4th grade, and there was a 3rd grader in the room and it was her first day in there because there was conflict with her teacher and she couldn't be in the other 3rd grade room because her and another student had to be separated. So I had this 4th grade class and a 3rd grade student who still needed 3rd grade curriculum. So I was juggling both of those, and then I come to find out I know the teacher that was not treating this child right, and it was very awkward. I got sucked into some conversation that was very negative about this teacher, and they're like, oh, you know, are you friends? And I really just had to, and I didn't even talk. I wasn't a part of the conversation, I was just there. And I just said, I know her from working with her in the past. I don't know that much about her. I don't know anything about this situation. And just left it at that. Like, don't let yourself get sucked into drama or bad talking about anybody else in the building, regardless of whether you know what's going on or not. Just try to stay out of it. And so I just backed up, and that teacher ended up not being there for the rest of the year anyway. But you just really have to stay positive and stay focused and don't get sidetracked with any negativity.
Well, and they say a lot too with the whole negative, like teachers' lounges can be breeding grounds for a lot of complaining and negative behaviors. And I know, I don't know if anybody has said this yet, but that some people suggest you kind of avoid the teachers' lounge, which I think can be good advice once you're kind of established in it, but it's also a really good place to make connections with people. And I think that even once you're in, like I met some teachers who they would come for like the special events to the teachers' lounge, like if there was a potluck or if there was a birthday celebration or whatever, that they would make a point to do those. But otherwise they kind of stayed in the room, and it was for that reason, because it's so easy to talk about the students that are driving you crazy, which you're not supposed to do anyway, but talk about students, talk about other staff, talk about your administration, and to stay, try to stay the positive person. And you can say you're going to do that, but when you get in the middle of a teacher's lounge with a lot of teachers who are complaining, it's super easy to get sucked down into those kinds of things. And that was hard for me going into it, was that like my first day, and they're all complaining about all this, and I'm like, this is going to be my job. Like, I want to do this. And so you do have to juggle that. I think one of my hardest, there was a lot of things that were challenging. I had, in my second placement in 4th grade, we had 2 students who really pushed all the limits, and with their normal teacher. And she left for a lot of the time I was there. She had conferences that she was supposed to, I'm not real sure why she took a student teacher, because she was going to be gone for a lot. She had conferences to go to, a few of them. She missed a few days for various other things. There was a lot of times she had to leave right after school, and so I couldn't just stay and talk to her about how things were going or what we could do differently. And so when she was gone for 3 days, I had these 2 boys to myself, and boy, did they just stretch the limits. And so I used all the other teachers that I had made, relationships with at that point, and they had come and told me, they're like, if you have any issues, I'm a classroom away, come get me. And that was really nice too. And you'll do that in school anyway once you're teaching, is when, you can team up with people, get good ideas on how to handle students in difficult situations. The principal was amazing. She came in on the Friday and the Thursday before Friday, and she's like, I'm taking them all day, so you don't have them tomorrow. And I did have a substitute teacher that had to be in there with me, but I was still doing everything, and so they were very helpful with that. But I think just trying to definitely utilize your other teachers and people that you work with.
And you have to remember too, you're there for the kids, like you're their advocate a lot. And so another situation I found myself in, I was just telling Elaine, at my second placement, it was a building where there were a lot of Hispanics and a lot of students from Burma. They spoke Chin. And one of the teachers was getting after these kids just because in the hall they were speaking their language to each other. And she said, no, you're going to speak English. I need to know what you're saying. I need to make sure nobody's bullying anybody. And that was awkward for me because I'm a very non-confrontational person. But at the same time, I kind of stood up for them, and I just said, I don't have a problem with them speaking their language when they're with me. You can tell from body language or tone or anything if someone's getting bullied. You don't have to actually hear the words. And so, obviously during instruction time, you want to be able to understand each other, but the rest of the time, if they want to talk to their friends in a language they're comfortable with, I have no problem with that. And so I kind of changed her mind a little bit, I think. But you're going to find yourself in awkward situations like that, but you have to remember you're there for the kids, not to make friends with all the adults in the building. So.
Did you guys have parents or associates in your room when you did that?
In the special ed room, I did.
Yeah.
And they knew what they were doing. I didn't even have to. They came in, they had their folders, they just did their thing. So.
We had my first day of taking over full-time teaching in the classroom. We had a little boy who came in from, where is he from? I can't remember where he was from, but spoke no English whatsoever. And I was like, this is fun. And so we had to work a lot with him to just feel like he was where he could be and feel okay. There was no way he was going to get on with second grade curriculum. And so we had people that came in and worked with him. The ESL, they pulled him out and they would come in and work with him. And I would say my first couple days with that, it seemed, you have your teacher in there with you anyway, but then to have other people, you start to worry what they think about your teaching, and you have to get over that really quick. And just that goes back to being confident in what you're doing, and they know that you're not, you've not taught before in this kind of a situation. People they're very understanding with that. But
Did you guys set your own teacher conferences? Did you guys run those, or how did that work?
I didn't run, I stayed for ours. That was in my first placement at the very end. So the teacher, she sat down with the parents and I was at the table with her, and she would kind of tell them everything and about their scores, which obviously had happened before I had come compared to what they were now, and about how they were. And then she would ask me, and she told me ahead of time, she's like, I'm going to have you tell them anything that you want to add to this and contribute to what you think they're doing. And I tried to find a lot of just the positive things about their kids, because I'm not their regular teacher, and so I didn't get into a lot of, well, they really need to work on this. But so we kind of teamed it together. She would just say, Mrs. Barnes, is there anything else you would like to add? And I just kind of chipped in my 2 cents with it. But I did work with her ahead of time to get the things ready and their folders put together and whatever. But it wasn't like she didn't leave that full responsibility on me, because I hadn't been there long enough to be able to really lead a conference.
Yeah, I had the same situation. I sat in on several of them, but it was at the beginning of my second placement, so I barely even knew the students yet. And a lot of it required a translator, which was nice to experience though, because if you don't think about it, as the teacher hosting a conference and needing a translator, you automatically just think you're going to talk to the translator. But it was really interesting to see the teacher was actually talking to the parent looking at them while they spoke, even though they didn't understand. And then the translator would speak, because she just mentioned the importance, like, you're not talking to the translator, you're talking to the parent, and then you just wait for the translator to come in, and you just go around that way, but keep the focus on the parent. So that was cool to sit in on and hear what they talk about and what they show at the conferences. And they always start out with something positive. Like, you don't ever go in with, well, this happened and your child was causing trouble and this is it. You don't start with that. They always talk about several positive things first, and then you just kind of gently throw in those, oh, you need to work on this type of thing. So.
Do you guys have any situations where you had to address parents at all? Or you were like, I mean, like, not necessarily bad things, but things that happen in the classroom you were the full-time teacher that you had to deal with?
At my first placement, once the kids get comfortable with you, they're gonna push your buttons and they're gonna test their limits and see how much they can get away with you. And so there was a couple of boys that, you know, they'd be talking things to each other in the back of the room while I'm teaching, or just doing obnoxious little things like that. And I didn't contact the parents. I would just talk to my co-op afterwards when I was full-time. And she said she would contact the parents, but I kind of wanted to deal with it on my own instead of just going to the parents. So I didn't have her contact the parents either. I just sat down with the two boys after school, 5 minutes before their bus came, and we talked it out and talked about plans for the next week and how to make more positive choices and just work through it together. I didn't have really serious concerns.
The class where I had the 2 4th grade boys, that when my teacher was gone for 3 days to a math conference, she gave me the cell phone number of the parent because she wanted to be contacted. She knew that one of her boys was not making good choices, and so she basically was like, I want to know how the day goes. And so she left me the cell phone number, and she's like, you can either text her from your phone. If you don't want her to have your phone number, you can call her from the school phone, but she wants to be notified how things went. Well, things didn't go great, and so I had to call and tell her, we've had a tough day and things weren't really great. I actually had to go out to her car one time when she went to pick him up and talk to her about whatever issue we had, and she was she listened, but I'm not the teacher, and so I think she just planned on dealing with it when she got back. But she did ask for me to keep in touch and let her know how things went. So that's always, it's hard. I mean, you're there for the kids, but they do have parents, and that can be scary. But mostly, I had really good, especially parent-teacher conferences. They were very, when you told them things that their kids need to work on or issues they had, they were on it. They're like, okay, we'll be on this. And, I was scared of doing conferences for that reason, because we had some kids who, in 2nd grade, were iffy on some things. And the teacher had told me, this parent and this parent can be really difficult, so just be prepared. And I was like, great. But they were great. And that's the other thing I want you to think about too, is the teacher has their opinion of the kids, and they will sometimes be very different for you than they will be for their teacher. And I had one teacher who's like, this one right here drives me crazy. He was my favorite kid. I mean, we just clicked with our personalities. And so, you want to know about the kids and you want to know about their parents, but I would say take it all with a grain of salt, because you're a different person. People interact differently with other people, and just be careful not to make those preconceived ideas of how you think students. Everybody deserves a new chance, and like I said, that kid that made her crazy, he was so my favorite. I loved him. And she's like, you're letting him get away with too much. I'm like, he's fine. But parents can be intimidating, but most of them really just want the best for their kid, and they appreciate what you're doing for their families. And as long as they know you care, I think that was the big thing, to them, to tell them, I'm doing this with your kid, and this is important because I want to see them be successful. And the only way they're going to be successful is if they can A, B, C, D with this classroom and the situation. And once they know that you really have the best for their child, they're pretty good. So
you really have to go into conversations with parents like that, because if you have a parent that's really mad and seems terrifying or intimidating, you just have to look at it well, they're doing this because they love their child. And when you can meet on that common ground, hey, I care about your kid just as much as you do, let's figure this out, then they'll back down a little bit, and you can have a calmer conversation. You just have to change your mindset about it too.
How about any advice on the practice? I know some are worried about that, and some have already conquered it.
Don't overthink it. Don't overwhelm yourself with it. I mean, it's obviously an important test, but I believe there is such a thing as overstudying, because you're going to overthink things and second guess things, and I mean, just study to where you feel comfortable, and then create little things, and this is what I do, like things that would not make sense to any of you, like things that help me remember, like, oh, this acronym, whatever, like create things in your own mind that will help you remember things, and you don't need to share them with other people because it can be embarrassing or weird or whatever, you know, but just, I don't know, I wasn't that worried about mine, I guess. So.
Oh, I panicked. I freaked out. No, and I think that's true. You can get yourself so worked up that it becomes a bigger monster than it actually is. Definitely study. I mean, I took one of my personal days at work off the Friday before I took it, maybe Thursday before, and I just spent that day studying and going through stuff. I took a lot of notes. I think one of the things that helped me the most was I went on the computer and searched. There was a lot of YouTube videos with people who kind of go over questions and talk about different areas that you study. And I think the practice too scared me so much because it's such a huge, like there's so many things it covers, and you know, like math is one thing, there's so many things you can learn, but I felt like with science is huge. I mean, there's like infinity of things you can learn about, and so that stressed me out. So I focused on the things that I didn't feel most comfortable with, and I studied more on those than the things that I felt like I would do okay. And yeah, just watched a lot of videos. I searched a lot of practice tests online and took as many of those as I could. I did pay for with the testing place that you register has those practice tests you can take. I did pay, I think it was like $90, and you get free tests. You can take them as many times as you want for so many days or something. I did that. I think that helps you more with like getting used to the format. I think some of the questions were sort of related to it, but I wouldn't take those and depend on that solely for, like, if you pass that, then to be like, oh, I'm going to pass. You might, but I feel like the questions were a little bit different. But I did check out a couple books from the library and on the practice too. I think mostly just online. There's a lot of people who've taken the test and then have come back to help other people, and that's where I think I got most of my stuff from. And I'm a big know your study style. Like if you're really good at listening, then find people that talk to you online about it and get that in your head. If you're good with videos, you know, I'm a note taker. Like if I write things down, I remember it better. I have a whole notebook just full of notes that I just took, and then I would go back and read them. And at some point you have to put it down and just know that you've done the best you can do. And if you take it once and you don't pass, you have another chance. You know, it's stressful, but it's not as bad, I don't think, as you think it's going to be. So.
Can I add to that? Because I just took mine like 2 weeks ago. Okay, my first piece of advice is try to find something that makes you laugh before you walk in. I know that sounds silly, but the people that gave me the exam were so funny. And I think they did that intentionally to try to relax me a little bit. And so like I was laughing before I walked into my test, like this big, huge, serious test that I've been freaking out about. And then my second thing is the actual format itself. I did not know this, and maybe you knew it, Elaine, because you took the practice test. But it did, or you took the practice test.
Right.
But it gives you an option where you can mark a question if you're not sure about it, or if you're like, oh, I just don't know this question, but you kind of want to keep going because you see that clock in the corner that's counting down. So it's really nice that it gives you the option to mark that question, and then after you finished it, it gives you an option for review. So if there are, let's say, 7 questions that you just weren't really sure on, it gives you the option to go into those questions and review them. And I did not know that going in, but I found that to be very helpful.
Absolutely. I did that with a lot of them that I was on the line with. I'm like, okay, mark it and move on. And then, yeah, then at the end you still have, like, I think I had 15, 20 minutes at the end that I could go back and really kind of sit on those a little bit longer and see, yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want this back?
I don't know if they have another drawing or not.